The Pittsburgh Pirates currently lead all teams in spring training in home runs. Could it be a precursor to a power surge for the Pirates in 2024?
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome back, everybody, to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates every day. My name is Ethan Smith. You can follow me on Twitter at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates for all of your news, analysis, opinions, and reactions to everything going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. And we're talking more about the Pittsburgh Pirates today here on the show, and we're talking more spring training, but we're also talking about something happening in spring training that could really go into the season. And it's something that I think that a lot of us have thought about throughout the offseason just a little bit with the current roster construction and how things are looking right now, that this Pittsburgh Pirates team could be in for a power surge in 2024. And you look at the Pirates over the last couple of seasons, they've been a below average home run team. They've been a below average power team for quite a while. Not even really the last couple seasons. It's been a minute since we could say that the Pirates have really had a plus power and a plus home run team. A lot of that is mainly due to the lack of power and talent around the roster. But when you enter 2024 now and you look at this team and you look at what it's going to be constructed like, more than likely, that dynamic has changed. That dynamic changes a little bit. You have outside acquisitions that really can help you bring that number up and be a plus power team. You look at other household names that you could look at and say, oh yeah, that guy could take a step up this year. He could definitely hit more home runs than he did last year. And that's creating what could be a fun lineup for this Pittsburgh Pirates team in 2024. And right now, I mean, you currently look at what the Pirates have done so far in spring. And yes, I know it's spring training, but the Pirates currently lead the way in Major League Baseball in homers with 21 this spring. That's 4 more than the second place LA Dodgers. So that's some good company to be in. And they also currently rank 4th in slugging with a .454 clip. And yes, again, I know it's spring training, but this could be a preview of what's to come for the Pirates in terms of power in this lineup. And when you go back to last year, going back to last season, the Pirates ranked 24th in slugging and 28th in home runs. Just not good. And a lot of that had to do with a lot of different factors that we're about to get into now. I mean, you look at Pittsburgh last season, they had 2 20-plus home run guys in Jack Sawinski, who had 26, and Brian Reynolds, who had 24. After that, though, there was a pretty significant drop-off in home runs from this team. Ke'Bryan Hayes, of course, being 3rd with 15. So you would like to see that significant drop-off kind of be a little bit smaller unless Jack Sawinski and or Brian Reynolds or both really take flight and go into the 30s. But at the end of the day, every team really needs power all up and down the lineup. You look at other rosters that are successful in Major League Baseball, like the Philadelphia Phillies, the Atlanta Braves, the LA Dodgers, all in the National League, who hit the baseball well. They just hit the baseball well, and they hit it over the fence more often than not. And the only player to hit double-digit home runs from this team last year and not be on the roster entering 2024 is Carlos Santana. And Andrew McCutchen and Joshua Palacios were the other 2 who hit double-digit home runs. And, of course, those guys are returning, with Kutch making his spring debut yesterday and Palacios looking like he's slated to make his spring debut today. You also have to factor in the outside signings here when you're talking about the potential for a power surge for this team this year. You look at Edward Olivares, who I've talked about a lot on the show. He hit 12 home runs last year, had an expected home run rate of 17.3, and hasn't really done all that well this spring so far, but he has flashed some power by hitting the ball hard. He's just not getting very lucky in terms of where he's hitting it. Rowdy Tellez was another outside acquisition that the Pirates made, and he had a down year in 2023, but even in a down year, he hit 13 home runs and had 35 the year before in 2022. So it is hopeful that he regains some of that 2022 form, obviously. And then you also really, and I think this is the biggest wild card in all of this for the Pirates, is that you have to consider O'Neal Cruz, who missed all of 2023 for the most part, not being in that lineup. And he returns to the lineup this season, hopefully staying healthy. And he hit 17 home runs in just 331 at-bats in 2022. He's played the equivalent of basically half of a major league season, and he already has 19 home runs. So that speaks to the fact that he could very well be a 2020 player if he really stays healthy and continues to progress as a player. So inserting him back in will also raise the home run total as well. Now, FanGraphs also had some projections on this, and it has the Pirates with 11 players that are expected to be on the opening day roster with double-digit home runs. That goes from Jack Sawinski to Brian Reynolds to Ke'Bryan Hayes to Andrew McCutchen to Joshua Palacios to Edward Olivares to Henry Davis, a lot of different guys involved in that list. And when you add those projected numbers together from those 11 players who are all slated to have more than 10 home runs, it comes out to 165, which is 6 home runs more than the entire roster's total last year, which was at 159. So that's not including when you're going to be inserting other guys into this lineup and other guys that might not be in that double-digit total, like I believe I want to say it was Connor Joe, who was at 9 on their projection. So that raises that number as well. And then you're obviously going to have Yasmani Grandal, who could hit a couple. You're going to have Jared Triolo, who could also take that next step as well. And projections usually stay within what a player has already done. And I think that's interesting when you're taking this into account, because there are players on this Pittsburgh Pirates roster that have already passed that 20 home run threshold. Brian Reynolds, Jack Sawinski, Rowdy Tellez, they've all done that. But you can also make the argument that some of these young guys could take the next step in their development. Henry Davis has already hit multiple home runs this spring, and he looks poised to take a step up from his 7 home runs last year. And you really consider that he only had 225 at-bats with those 7 home runs, and you should see that he'll definitely get more. 1, if his power element gets better, and 2, he'll play the full season more than likely, so he'll more than surpass 225 at-bats. Liover Peguero even showed some power elements we didn't expect last year from what he did in the minor leagues. He hit 7 home runs last year. If he becomes the everyday second baseman, I think it's warranted that you can expect that number to go up throughout the year, and he could take a step up if he's the full-time second baseman. Even Jared Triolo, who got plenty of time at third base with Ke'Bryan Hayes' injury last year, got plenty of time as a utility player throughout the infield and looks poised to do that again. He hit well last year. His glove is always going to be there, but even over the offseason, there's been little rumblings that Jared Triolo has developed a little bit of a power game as well. And you're looking at the potential lineup as a whole and seeing how it's constructed. And quite honestly, when you're looking at the starting 9 that you would want on the field, that being something that I'll cover later this month, it's quite honestly hard to find someone in the starting 9 who can't hit at least 10 home runs. And then you have the guys like Jack Sawinski, Brian Reynolds, Rowdy Tellez, O'Neal Cruz. I'll even include Ke'Bryan Hayes in that lineup of guys that can hit 20 home runs. And when you consider that, and you really take it and look at this, I mean, you're looking at a guy like Connor Joe, who could be your number 9 hitter and has hit double-digit home runs before. That's easily something that he can do. And in today's game, power can win or lose you games. It could turn the tides on if you're a competitive team or not. And it appears the arrow is pointing up for the Pirates in the power department. And I don't see how you could say it isn't. I mean, you look at, again, the Rowdy Tellez acquisition. He's going to hit bombs in PNC Park. Edward Olivares just has to bring the launch angle up a little bit and hit the ball a little bit harder. He can hit 15 home runs. You look at Joshua Palacios, who already hit 10 last year. Jack Sawinski and Brian Reynolds have 30-plus home run potential if they have significant, consistent seasons. And we've seen it a bit this spring already. We already have. We've seen the home run ball be integral to what this lineup thinks they can do. And I expect it to translate. And I think it's something that we can expect from this Pirates team throughout the 2024 season, to have some power involved in this lineup for the first time in a very long time. And that could lead to more games won. And I think, again, the wild card to all this is O'Neal Cruz. Inserting him back into the lineup is going to be huge for this team to become a plus power team. And I think he's going to lead the way, along with Jack Sawinski, along with Brian Reynolds, potentially Key Brian Hayes, Rowdy Tellez, maybe even Henry Davis. You're starting to see a lot more guys in that starting 9 that have plus power than what you're used to in Pittsburgh, and that is a very, very good thing. The Pirates made a lot of offseason acquisitions this year, and with the offseason drawing closer and closer to an end, with spring training baseball back and opening day just around the corner, what are the impacts that these guys are going to make, and who needs to make the most impact of the offseason signings? Before we get into that, though, we're going to talk about Prize Picks. Folks, Prize Picks is your place to bet just based off the numbers. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100, because Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. They are the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports, and it's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more than or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like Meek Mill and Sugar Sean O'Malley? Well, you can find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries from some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Prize Picks even offers injury insurance so that your injuries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player projection won't count against you and the rest of your entry stays alive. I always like playing Prize Picks. It is available in Georgia for me. I like doing it with basketball. Basketball on Prize Picks is very fun. I like betting the over-unders on Kawhi Leonard and Paul George a lot more often than not. I'm ending up walking away with some cash. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy with Prize Picks. And folks, don't forget as well that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app, YouTube, and those places. And also, welcome back to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates every day. Again, my name is Ethan Smith. You can find me again on Twitter at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates for all of your news, analysis, opinions, and reactions to everything going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates. And there was a lot going on with the Pittsburgh Pirates this offseason, and it was a really busy one for the Pittsburgh Pirates in 2023 and 2024. Obviously, losing Johan Oviedo and Endy Rodriguez for 2024 made it an even busier offseason, but the Pirates went out and made a plethora of moves to fill some gaps in the roster. Now, if you listen to this show and you're an everyday listener of the show, throughout the offseason, we discussed starting pitching nearly every day. It was something that I had to discuss every day because the Pirates had to fill the holes in the rotation. Really, at one point, the only real starter they had was Mitch Keller, if we're being really serious about all this. And the Pirates patched the rotation a bit with Marco Gonzalez and Martin Perez, who I think are going to be the 2 and 3 starter for now, because they haven't made another move with a starter, and you still have questions about Roansy, questions about Quinn Priester, questions about Luis Ortiz. So you expect that Marco Gonzalez and Martin Perez are going to be the guys that are going to complement Mitch Keller, who is going to be your ace. Now, when talking about the biggest impact that any of these guys can make, I think you have to look at Perez and Gonzalez, just because really starting pitching could dictate if this team competes or not. Now, I know I mentioned about power being in that same vein, but starting pitching for this team could really decide if the Pittsburgh Pirates are a good team in 2024 or if they're just a subpar team or a bad team again. And I think that puts a good amount of pressure on Perez and Gonzalez. And both Perez and Gonzalez had strong 2022s and not so strong 2023s for very different reasons. Obviously, Perez was just buried in that strong Texas rotation with DeGrom, Eovaldi, Montgomery, all those guys there. And Gonzalez was dealing with injuries. But the Pirates believe that they can rekindle some of that 2022 form, and that's something that they hope they can do. Now, I think Perez, of the two, it's Perez or Perez, either one. I say either one all the time. I think he has the better chance to. And seeing even as in a down season that he had last year, a down year, in 20 starts, he had a 4.45 ERA and 71% ground ball rate. If the Pirates would have had that last year, they might have won 80 games. With Johan Oviedo and Mitch Keller, of course, leading the way. If Perez was their third starter with those numbers, again, they might have won 80 games. Now, you go back to 2022, obviously, when he had a much better ERA at 2.89. His barrel rate allowed was 4.3, and he rarely allowed hard contact. Those are all things that are going to sound really nice for a guy in Perez who we all know should be able to pitch well in a favorable ballpark for lefties. And I think he could be one of the sneaky good signings of the offseason. I really do. I think if he can somewhat rekindle some of that 2022 form and even be in between what he was last season in 2022, folks, he could be a fun player for this team. But I do think it's important to say that Gonzalez is just about as important as Perez is. And although he's been one of the most consistent pitchers in baseball outside of last year, if you go look at his statistics throughout his career, the injury concern is worrisome. And if he stays healthy, you look at Gonzalez, and I think he's always going to allow soft contact. He's going to let the defense help him. Really, he just has to stay healthy, and that's the driving force for him. And I think just like Perez, if he can rekindle some of that 2022 form, the Pirates are going to be happy. Now, arguably in the most shocking signing that the Pirates made in the offseason, I think that has to come from Aroldis Chapman. And no one really expected that move at all, but when I saw that move was made, I think the Pirates have a top 10 bullpen in baseball. I did a whole show on that. I think it's something that the Pirates definitely have the ability to do. I think they are a team that can have a top 10 unit in all of baseball with the bullpen. And when your back three is Colin Holderman, who was a top guy in holds last year, Aroldis Chapman, who was a former closer and also a great setup man for Jose Leclerc in the playoffs last year, and David Bednar, I think you'll walk away happy. And that's not adding in the complementary pieces like Carmen Mlodzinski, Ryan Borucki, Jose Hernandez, Dario Moreta, who's dealing with an injury right now, potentially a Hunter Stratton even thrown in there, Brent Honeywell Jr. The bullpen dynamic changed in one swift move. And Chapman, obviously, I think you look at him and say he will remain one of the top lefty relievers in baseball. Even if he does take a small step back, he could with his age. And his signing again made the bullpen unit, which I already felt was a strong unit already, that much stronger. And I think it's something that's going to benefit the Pirates in close games throughout the entire 2024 campaign. And you look at away from pitching, obviously we spoke about Edward Olivares a bit in that first segment, and he has the potential to have a breakout if the tools come together. He's not an adequate defender. He's off to a slow start in spring with 2 for 18 start. He does have plus power potential, though. And he's a career 261 hitter with 24 homers and a 736 OPS. And I think you have to expect that he's going to be fully ingrained in the right field battle with Palacios and Connor Joe. And at worst, he'll offer power off the bench as a fourth outfielder. And if Edward Olivares is your fourth outfielder, I'm good with that. I mean, especially if he's performing well and somebody else is performing well also. Now, first base has and continues to be a question mark for Pittsburgh. We know that. And instead of bringing back Carlos Santana, which I really wanted them to do, the Pirates opted for another former Milwaukee Brewer, getting Rowdy Tellez. And much like Gonzalez and Perez, the Pirates hope Tellez turns back the clock in 2022. And Tellez does well, one, not to chase out of the zone. He's also a guy that gets on base pretty well via the free pass. So if the homers can return from that 35 mark, I don't expect him to go that high. But if he can go 20 plus, I think he could be a valuable DH option, play first base a good bit. His defense isn't great there, so I don't want to see it. But that's something I think we can expect. And it's also worth noting that Tellez has a strong lefty swing that should work well at PNC. And we'll see if we get even a sliver of that prior success. And you look at some of the other moves that the Pirates made. I mean, you look at Gilberto Celestino, who could be in that outfield mix as a potential backup outfielder. You look at Brent Honeywell Jr., who I mentioned earlier. He could be a bullpen arm. You look at Joe Perez, who they got last season from the Houston Astros, who didn't really get a lot of time in the Pirate system, who could also be an adequate player for this team. But again, I think when you're talking about these offseason acquisitions and who needs to have the biggest impact and who is the most important, it has to be Martin Perez and Marco Gonzalez, because they need to have the biggest impacts of these offseason signings. Tellez and Olivares are important as well, but it's a driving force of mine that I think the Pirate season could very well be determined by how the pitching staff performs. And like it or not, Marco Gonzalez and Martin Perez are fully a part of that and are going to be fully ingrained in that. But all these guys have a chance to make impacts. They really do. We've seen a lot of them play in spring. And speaking of spring, we're going to get into spring news and notes here in just a moment. But before we do, we're going to talk about eBay Motors. Folks, eBay Motors has millions of parts for your MVP, and you can win every time with parts that fit your ride. Passion, drive, and patience, that's what brings home the winning trophy and is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. And folks, welcome to the third and final segment of today's episode of Locked On Pirates here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Again, where it's your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, every single day. If you're a loyal third segment listener, put it in the comments. I want to know what people are listening to Spring News and Notes right now and what people will be listening to whatever third segment idea I come up with in the regular season. The third segment of every show, I want it to be something daily that involves all of my daily listeners, potentially a Q&A, potentially something like that. I want to hear your thoughts on that too. So drop that down below in the comments, also on YouTube or Twitter. Now, another day, of course, means another spring news and notes. And folks, you know where I'm starting. The Pirates won 6-5 over the Blue Jays on Tuesday, and O'Neal Cruz, who's hoping for a breakout in 2023, and I'm also just so happy to watch on a baseball field again, launched a home run up in the zone at 115 miles per hour off the bat. I think it's safe to say that O'Neal Cruz might be back after that. And folks, yeah, StatCast should have a lot of fun with Cruz this year. And you're looking at what O'Neal Cruz is able to do. You look at the pitch that he hit. It wasn't even really a strike. It was a fastball above the zone that he just launched 115 miles per hour off the bat into the Florida sky. And that's something that I think a lot of us are super excited to see back in the lineup. Liover Peguero, of course, added a long ball of his own, a walk-off homer. Mind you, that was 104.2 miles per hour off the bat. So once again, the Buccos were hitting the baseball hard and over the fence on Tuesday. Sung Chae Chang also impressed. He's been impressing this spring, hit a long ball as well, showcasing some of that power he improved upon last year. If you remember, I spoke about Chang in an episode not too long ago where I was talking about him in the prospects pool, and seeing now that he's the 9th ranked prospect in the Pirates system, I think there's a lot of optimism that surrounds Chang, and he's shown some of that power element. Had 6 home runs in 2022, 13 last year, has hit the ball well, arguably the best defensive shortstop in the system right now. I think it's interesting to see what Chang can do in the minor leagues in 2024. Jared Jones pitched again yesterday. Jared Jones, who I'm going to continue to loathe over as a guy that's going to be a very impactful player on this team this year, not right away. I don't think he makes the opening day roster, but you look at what he did yesterday. He had 14 pitches that were the highest pitch velocities of the day of any pitcher that pitched yesterday, including 3 that went over triple digits. He threw 27 pitches in 2 innings, a scoreless ball. And as I continue to say, again, he won't break the opening day roster, but he'll be up quickly, I think, in either May or June, depending on the development of his secondary pitches as the season continues. That's really what I'd like to see a little more from spring with Jared Jones when he's out there. We know the fastball's good. We know the slider is going to be good too. I want to see more of the changeup. I want to see if the changeup is going to continue to progress into a strong third pitch for him. I want to see if that's something they're going to work with him throughout the minor leagues before he does eventually come up in May or June. And I think that's why he's not going to come up right away. But I would like to see in spring, for the remainder of spring, to see him just throw it a little bit more. Quinn Priester also gave up 1 earned over 2 innings, and he's still fully involved in that rotation battle with Ortiz and Rowanzi. Jose Hernandez continued his strong start to spring. He struck out 2 while walking 2 in his lone inning of work. Andrew McCutchen singled in his spring debut, while both Abraham Gutierrez, by the way, not a name that I expected to really be talking about too much in spring, but he continued his strong start to grapefruit play, has his OPS up to 1.067. Nice to see from a guy who could potentially be a backup outfield option for the Pittsburgh Pirates at some point. And as for today, it does appear that Joshua Palacios, friend of the show, will be making his spring debut, leading off and playing right field, which I believe fully starts the right field battle between him, Edward Olivares, and Connor Joe. Henry Davis will also look to continue his strong play, while mainstays Brian Reynolds and Jack Sawinski will start in Sarasota against Baltimore. We'll also get another mainstay and another look at Mitch Keller, who has already been announced as the opening day starter versus Miami on March 28th. We've gotten some looks at Keller in spring as well. Nice to see him get ramped up and hopefully have a very good season after his all-star campaign last year. And seeing the Pirates play the Orioles, by the way, is always fun in spring. Both teams feature multiple top prospects, as we saw when Skeens debuted. They feature tons of top young talent, and it's also the first night game of spring tonight, starting at 6:05. Monitoring injuries, you obviously have Dauri Moreta and David Bednar, who will be continued to be monitored with their injuries. Moreta could miss extended time. David Bednar has yet to pitch in spring, but I think he'll be fine for opening day. And the hope, again, is that the Pirates don't have to deal with any more before opening day. Now, we've already seen Kutch return. We have Palacios returning tonight. So Bednar and Moreta are the only injury concerns, but we'll continue to cover everything in spring until March 28th, when the Pirates play the Marlins to begin the 2024 campaign. And we have 2 more episodes coming your way tomorrow and Friday this week here on the Locked On Pirates podcast. And by the way, make sure you follow the podcast on Twitter at Locked On Pirates. Follow me on Twitter at MVP_Ethan. You can find this show on YouTube and all of your podcast platforms because it is free and available to you. And until tomorrow, folks, thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great rest of your Wednesday, and I will see you on the flip side.